That's it.
Okay. Hi, welcome to Do You Mind Video Lab Series with Oz Garcia and Bonnie Pavese. In this episode, we discuss the importance of diagnostics and which tests are valuable for longevity and how often you should be doing them. What are biomarkers and which types of doctors you should see for additional information or treatments. We'll go into comprehensive blood work, gene testing, as well as other tips and tools to help you to better understand the way your body is working and how to help it work at its highest capacity.
Terrific.
Okay, let's start off.
Sure.
So let's start off with what are biomarkers. I think this is sort of a newer vocabulary term for most people out there.
It's true, Bonnie. A biomarker pretty much is a signal sent off, an interpretation that you're going to get off a blood test, right? Mm-hmm. So if I do a standard blood test, biomarkers are the breakdown of, let's say, a heart panel. Mm-hmm. Those are my biomarkers. My cholesterol is a biomarker. My good cholesterol is a biomarker. My bad cholesterol, and so on, by each different panel that we're going to break down in a blood test. Okay. Or for that matter, if we're going to do a gene test, you're going to get biomarkers there also.
Okay, so we'll evaluate different companies on the market and different tests, and let's talk about that, because I think that's a good place for us to start. And I think at the end of all of this, we're gonna try to get a pamphlet with all this information. So if you don't have access to New York, to come in here and see you, people can take care of this at home in their hometown. Try to meet with a functional medicine doctor and get the ball rolling. But let's talk about your clinic. Okay. You pretty much do all these tests here.
That's correct.
And how do you, tell me the process. How do you do that?
Look, everybody's got to get tested. Yeah. From my point of view, if I want to put together a program that's going to be used for self-optimization, and or if we've got some health concerns, right? I want to get a snapshot of what's going on. The best way to do that is to do a very comprehensive blood test. Mm-hmm.
We're going to get into that. Yeah.
Exactly, with the different biomarkers.
But you offer that here, so someone can come see you and get the blood work done in-house here.
That's correct. We have our own clinic.
Okay, great.
So I want a snapshot. For the long game, I want to do a gene test.
Okay.
So that you can actually order. There are different companies that I think are terrific. The one that I really like is Self-Decode. Okay. And pretty much what you're doing is you're getting a DNA sample from your saliva. Okay. That's collected, goes into a box, it comes with its own medical mailer. Then we get a report several weeks later. So I want to unpack as much information about you as possible so I know what I'm dealing with now, what I could be dealing with in terms of your genes that are either good or bad that you and I can leverage.
So would you say that sort of the more tests you do, the better because you have more information, or is it sometimes not that necessary, or how does someone gauge sort of where they should start?
From my point of view, I'm not crazy about too much information. There are doctors that are going to run a gamut of tests on you, and they may have their reasons why. In order for us to do our work, which is get you started on a certain lifestyle path that's going to optimize your health and well-being, I need to unpack a certain amount of data about you. I need to understand your biology as best as I can. So anything that we do in terms of blood work is going to cover risk factors, your current hormonal state, right? There may be concerns there that you and I want to, same thing, unpack. There may be concerns in terms of health liabilities that run through your family.
Right.
So you want to look at that through a gene test. There may be microbiome concerns. That's the bacteria that lives in your colon that determines overall a lot that has to do with your immune system and a lot that has to do with your states of mind. So we can do a microbiome test. Let's take a look at your bacteria, the bacteria that should be there, that shouldn't be there, that we may need to colonize, right? So those are the more basic tests
that you kind of have everyone, you start there.
That's correct.
Okay, let's start then. Let's unpack our comprehensive blood work. Let's just go through the names of where we start, the sort of the basics all the way to the more complicated, so that we can get as much information as possible. So I know we start with sort of the basic medical panel, right? The CBC, the CMP, the SMA. What are those working? What information is that giving us?
Well, the comprehensive blood count, the standard medical analysis, the comprehensive metabolic panel, all of those are going to give us basic data about organ function. How your heart's doing, certainly how your immune system is doing, kidney function, liver function, and then it's going to give us a window into certain balances or imbalances with your electrolytes, right? So that's really important up front. I need to know that your kidneys are doing fine. I need to know that your heart is doing fine. I need to know that your overall organ function, kidney and liver and so on, is doing fine. Pancreatic function. So that we're gonna grab on the CBC, the SMA, and the metabolic panel. Beyond that, we're gonna dive a little bit deeper, right?
Yeah, right. So we talked about beyond that. Let's say even if you don't have any biomarkers that are saying, okay, red flag, let's look at this.
Sure.
I think a lot of people right now we want to start looking at the heart panel, right?
Correct.
Okay, so what do we test in the heart panel beyond the cholesterol that you would get in the CBC? And you know, what are our potentials for seeing there?
Well, you can do a very comprehensive deep dive just into your heart alone. Mm-hmm. I think for many individuals where on the original blood test, you've got some red flags. Let's say that your cholesterol is a little elevated, the bad cholesterol. Let's say that we test a little further. We're looking at certain panels like homocysteine, which is a blood protein that goes high the older you get, or if you've got a gene sequence that actually makes you susceptible to high homocysteine. High homocysteine is an indicator of heart disease, right? So if we've got, let's do a hypothetical, elevated homocysteine, elevated bad cholesterol, then you and I want to do a deep dive with a more comprehensive blood test that's strictly about the health of your heart, right? And that's going to measure a lot more detail, other biomarkers that you're not going to get on a standard blood test.
So that's the cardio-metabolic panel.
That's correct.
Yeah, and that would be something that you would request after something came back in the heart panel. So you would probably start most people doing the CBC, the CMP, the SMA, and the heart panel.
That's correct.
A baseline, and then from there you would go into the cardio-metabolic report.
That's correct.
What further information does the cardio-metabolic report give to us?
Well,
and I have to say, I'm always like so curious because every time, you know, I go get my blood work done every 3 months, and every time I go, I want to like, you know, ask for more and more, and obviously insurance doesn't cover everything, so
right.
You want to be specific in what and why we're doing this. But let's say like, yeah, you get back, okay, your LDL is like a little higher than normal,
right.
Like depending on your age, maybe they're considering putting you on medication, which
Correct.
is something we'll get into. But I think, yeah, what are when we're considering this and we're looking at our heart panel,
sure.
We want to go into the cardio metabolic panel.
Correct.
What are we seeing there that's like, and what is it that we're looking for? Are we looking for heart disease? Are we looking for signs that you might be predisposed for heart disease?
All of that. In
Yeah.
other words, if you're doing...
And then like, how scary is it if it comes back, oh, you kind of have heart disease, but no one would have found this for 10 years.
That's correct.
Yeah. So the point of this exercise is the sooner you find out, the better.
Correct.
Because you can prevent long-term damage.
Yeah, remember where we began.
Yeah.
You want to look at the long game.
Yeah.
Right? So if we were to think about somebody that we both admire, like Peter Attia, and what's the reason why you would want to do a deeper dive, there's a distinction that he made that I think is very important, which is the difference between medicine 2.0 and medicine 3.0. So I would say for the series, it's important that whoever's watching us knows that you and I are operating out of a 3.0 model.
Yes.
Right, which is preventative.
Yes.
And that means that the information that we're gathering is telling us the potential for anything that may be wrong now and the potential for anything that could be wrong that's going to put you at risk down the road.
Yes, but we also want to do it in a way where it's not I mean, we want to give people all the information so they can, some people want to, really take on the science experiment. But I think that our style and our way of doing this is that we want to make it, something that you're able to put in your everyday life, right?
That's right.
Like you said originally, like a lot of people are recommending sobriety. You're not going to say never have a glass of wine, but you're going to say like really minimize it and really be mindful of when you're doing that and why, because the long-term health benefits aren't great. So when we look at this, we're not trying to overwhelm everyone. We're trying to say, okay, let's say we're going a few steps further.
Correct.
Because the more information you have, the more valuable it is at preventing further complications down the line.
And you don't want any surprises.
Yeah.
There are enough people that I know, and I suspect you know, that would rather not know. I'm not in that camp.
Yeah.
I want to know as much as possible.
I do. I mean, I have this conversation often, and I have friends who, their father-in-law is, had early onset Alzheimer's, and I'm like, doesn't your husband want to find out? And they're like, no, because then they would just have anxiety the rest of their life until that day happened. Whereas, now we have information that there are ways you could, prevent that or prolong, the onset of it. So I think, but it is really interesting. And so it's to each person their own and how they want to use this information.
Correct. But let's say, let's do another hypothetical that these friends of yours, if you carry a gene sequence for Alzheimer's, remember that the gene sequence stays the same your whole life, right? You're born with the gene sequence that you will die with. Mm-hmm. So just because you have the particular genes doesn't mean that they're going to get triggered. Right? So it's interaction between your genes and your environment.
So in the environment, that's why we're kind of looking at the blood work first, because that's sort of telling us, hey, this is what's going on in your environment.
Correct.
Right? Or this is what's currently happening in your body.
Right.
And then we're also, next topic, once we get through the blood work, we're going to talk about gene testing.
Correct.
And then from there, we can talk about your environment based on those two things and how you can leverage all the information to better your life.
Exactly. And let's be clear, Bonnie, about environment. We're talking about everything that you're coming in contact with, what you consume, what you eat.
Even what you touch, right? We were talking about microplastics, like...
Yeah, the air that you breathe, the water that you drink, the literal environment in terms of your home.
Yeah.
What you're
where
exposed
you live.
to. Correct. So all of these things will affect your gene sequences for the better, for the worse, right?
Yeah. So I got a sidetrack. Let's get back to the heart panel. We've got to cardio metabolic report.
Correct.
What further information beyond the heart panel are we going to get in the cardio metabolic report?
If I want to keep looking, I want to look at your hormones.
But hold on, we're gonna get to hormones.
Okay.
But we said the
with the
cardiometabolic. Should we look up what's in that?
Well, pretty much the cardiometabolic panel is going to break down into a very granular. It's going to break down in a very granular way, much more detail. Let's say about your cholesterol, for instance.
Okay.
So I can look at the quality of your bad cholesterol. I can actually understand if it's qualitatively something that's deadly, whether it's high or low, right? Because it isn't only about your levels of bad cholesterol, it's about the quality of the bad cholesterol itself. So many doctors, well-intentioned, really good cardiologists, they're gonna try and drop your bad cholesterol overall, right? But let's just say that the quality of your bad cholesterol, the particle itself, the volume of the particle itself, and its size, even if you drop it down, if it's really insidious, that's going to be a problem.
Okay.
And also whether or not it's quote unquote organically rusting, oxidizing. So I can measure the oxidation rate of your bad cholesterol. That's going to tell us a lot about the potential for heart disease also. So we can keep, breaking it down and looking at other qualitative measures, inflammatory damage to the heart. That shows up in different anti-nutrients that the cardiometabolic panel can measure too.
Which we said, so we have homeocysteine.
Cardiovascular reactive protein.
What does that measure?
That's going to measure a particular protein, just like it says cardiovascular reactive protein. CRP.
Oh, yeah.
And we do a version of it which is high sensitivity CRP. So if CRP goes up, we know that there's inflammation showing up around your heart that may be for any number of reasons, right? And you got to get that under control.
And then that's different from homeocysteine?
Correct. Homocysteine is a different blood protein. So you can have everything under control in terms of your cholesterol. You can have your bad cholesterol low. We can have good quality, bad cholesterol. We can have your good cholesterol, HDL, high. And we can even improve the quality of your good cholesterol, your HDL. So let's just say that we've got cholesterol under control. If your CRP is elevated, if your homocysteine is elevated, and there are other cardiomarkers of different kinds of enzymes and anti-nutrients in your blood that are elevated, then we need to go after those too, right? So we're going to get a complete breakdown, and again, a very granular breakdown of many different factors that come into play that will affect your heart besides cholesterol.
Okay. Okay, then beyond that, we also want to go into our hormones, right?
Correct.
So you want to do your thyroid panel?
Sure. Your thyroid's a battery.
Yeah.
It's like a battery pack.
It
It's located
keeps
over
you
here.
running, right?
Absolutely.
We talked about too, like sometimes thyroid is genetic, but sometimes also like a virus has physically, attacked your thyroid.
Who would have thought?
Yeah. Right.
I got viral thyroiditis when I was traveling and working in South America about 20 years ago. I just got really wiped out, didn't know what was going on, must have picked it up in just the way that people pick up something. And when I came back to New York City, a functional MD that's a dear friend of mine ran a blood panel on me, and lo and behold, my thyroid was extremely underactive. We suspected at that point that probably I had picked up a virus. And the result of having had viral thyroiditis was just a severe exhaustion. It affects your sleep because the thyroid's so useful in regulating sleep cycles too, right? And other aspects of what goes on with your body. Women, it controls a lot about your hormones, has a lot to do with ovulation, has a lot to do with body temperature. So many things are dependent on thyroid function. We need to take a look.
Yeah.
All right.
So we're gonna so when you do thyroid, we test. We don't want to just do the basics, right?
Correct.
We want to do the TSH, the free T3, T4, and the antibodies.
Yeah,
and why do we want to do all of those
because
instead of just the basic TSH?
Energy runs off of T3.
Okay.
T3 is ubiquitous throughout your body, and that's a particular hormone that's going to determine a lot about whether you have energy or not. So if there's anything that's thwarting levels of T3, if your levels of T3 are low, you're gonna suffer energetically.
Yeah.
Right? And oftentimes there are problems, autoimmune problems that show up. Mm-hmm. If you got a really bad infection, if you picked up mono, Epstein-Barr at some point, these are things that can also trigger problems within your thyroid, even a really bad flu. So all of a sudden you find that you're not recovering fully, and we'll run a panel on you because your complaints are accordingly. You're tired. Your feet are cold. Your hands are cold. You notice that even in a warm room, your nose may be cold. Right.
Yeah.
So circulation suffers when thyroid function is low.
Yeah.
So energy, even cosmetic aspects of what's going on with you. Your skin can get really dry. If your thyroid's underactive. You can lose your hair. Certainly energy is going to be a problem. That's why we need to look at your thyroid really well. All right? And then from there...
weight gain, right?
That's
such a huge part of it.
I would say that...
Or maybe not weight gain, but it's harder to lose weight. Or what do you feel, the thyroid in terms of weight?
There's a school of thought that underactive thyroid function can contribute to weight gain, right? I would say that it's a factor. Mm-hmm. Here I am, I'm really thin, and I had underactive thyroid function, right?
So it's not always a cause or always a symptom of it.
That's correct.
But some people do witness that symptom when they're having underactive thyroid.
But no question about it. So if indeed you are concerned with your weight, we're gonna do a thyroid panel anyway, right? Yeah. You do find often enough that T3 levels are low with people that are trying to manage their weight. Beyond that, we want to look at adrenal function.
Okay.
Right?
How do we test adrenal function?
There are different hormones that the adrenals produce.
Okay.
I'm going to do a cortisol test.
A cortisol test, yeah.
And we can test that through different ways. You can do a blood cortisol test. Oftentimes, you can do a salivary cortisol test.
Okay.
So you test your cortisol throughout the day by taking saliva samples in the morning, in the afternoon, in the ening. That's a different kind of way that we can also measure what's going on.
Okay, if you see you have elevated cortisol levels, where is that coming from and what is that representing, and then how are you handling pollution?
But it really depends on the time of the day that we took the cortisol sample,
Yeah.
right? So
what if it's all day? Like, I feel like my cortisol having a 2-year-old is high all
you wind up frazzled. I mean, we're talking about individuals often enough complaining about the fact that they can't get under from burnout, right? That their level of obligation, familial obligation, professional obligations, they're just unmanageable. So what you're going to find is an adrenal system that's on alert and on alarm all day long. So oftentimes what we'll do is measure cortisol also through saliva, right? And that way I can get a really good look at your cortisol levels throughout the day. What's crazy is how often we find that your cortisol is really low in the morning when you need it high, so you can get your day going. And then as the day progresses, your cortisol keeps increasing because your stress levels are unrelenting. So we've got enough evidence that a lot of individuals are winding up exhausted towards the end of the day because they're drinking too much coffee, the cortisol's up, they've got to deal with the kid later in the day after their professional obligations. So we're going to tackle that from a very different point in terms of what can we do lifestyle-wise to get that under control. On the other hand, you have people that the cortisol is kind of like a flat line. They're just exhausted all day long. All right, so it may be a combination of factors. Could be thyroid's low, cortisol is low, and that's classic. Right? Your battery packs are just blown out.
And do you think that people who their battery packs are blown out, it's just like from over burning your body? So you're not taking care of yourself, you're not eating well, you're overworking,
you're not sleeping well,
you're over partying.
Correct.
Yeah.
It depends on what the person wants.
Yeah.
There are people that feel that they thrive under a lot of stress,
pressure, yeah.
but eventually you're going to crash out.
Yeah,
it's going to pop out somewhere, right, Bonnie?
Yeah.
So we want to teach people how to be productive, deal with their obligations. We're not always successful, but successfully enough.
Right. That's I guess emotional health is really important in helping lower your cortisol.
Yeah, and you need to know when to back off, and
Yeah.
when you need to go to bed early, and what time do you need to get up, and how much coffee you're drinking.
Is having high cortisol, does that affect your organs over time? Is that an indicator for heart disease or for Alzheimer's, or what are we really seeing long term with high cortisol?
Stress isn't an abstraction. Stress is a combination of hormones, neurotransmitters, chemical activity within your body that are keeping you on hyper alert and hypervigilance way past the point where it should be doing that. There are consequences. We know that high stress, high exposure to stress hormones in your body, of which there are several besides cortisol, are going to age your brain quicker. They're going to age your body quicker. They're going to have a measurable effect on your state of mind, your moods. So consequentially, you need to deal with stress because we know that it can have a massive impact on your immune system, for instance. People that are under stress chronically are more prone to getting sick, things like colds, more susceptible to viruses and flus. So we could say that there's degenerative and neurodegenerative events that are occurring as a function of being under high stress and under high stress hormone exposure all day long. Through evolution, it was in the way that we've evolved as animals and as primates, we needed to have a very, I would say, potent stress response in the moment.
Right.
Right? So if you were a hunter-gatherer, we're talking about, I don't know, 50,000 or 1,000 years ago, and you're out and you've got your baby little human with you, your child, your baby progeny, you got to remember that although we're predators, we were also prey. So we're both predator and prey. We're terrific hunters, terrific gatherers, but we also look like lunch and did for a lot of predators throughout history. If you didn't have a good alarm system, a good stress system, right? Then if you saw a predator coming at you, you just wouldn't respond. It's good to get anxious if you've got a saber-toothed tiger coming at you, right? Get your kid, get out of harm's way. And it's a predictive mechanism. If you've learned enough and you've survived enough, just like wild animals now that are prone to being eaten, you know, an antelope, a wildebeest, and so on, they've got really good stress systems. But the point is that once you're out of harm's way, that the system that at one time protected you should come down to baseline.
Yeah.
Right? Once you're out of quote unquote harm's way. In the way that it is in the world today, in the postmodern world, the system hardly ever turns off.
Yeah.
You're just on alarm all day long. So there's a predator on you continually. Right. We could do your cortisol, just like we said before, morning, afternoon, and evening. And if what you're finding is consistently elevated levels all day long, you've got a problem.
And we're going to work.
Correct.
Down. But, okay. So then, and then after cortisol, we want to do more specific hormone testing,
That's
right?
correct.
Which there's a couple ways we can do that, right? We can just request, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, which is important, right? And then in females, you want to do it at 3 different times of the month, right?
Right after your period, mid-cycle when you're ovulating, and right before your period.
Okay.
Right, that gives you a good idea about the rise and drop for women in terms of their hormonal landscape. Also women that are prone to PMS.
Yeah.
Right? And whether it's complex PMS, depending
like PMDD,
on what your problem.
Right? But,
correct.
So what are you looking for there? And then how are you treating it once you find something? Like what biomarkers are we looking for there?
The fact that your estrogen has to be at a certain point at mid-cycle and your progesterone also, as it should be before you have your period. Women that tend to suffer from any number of concerns, anxiety, bloating, cravings, depression, a little bit of all of that, they probably have their ratio of estrogen to progesterone as they get past ovulation and getting closer to their period, way out of whack. So for some women, you need to get the progesterone right there at the right point. And what you find is that from all the imbalances, dietary imbalances, lifestyle imbalances, that as you get closer to your period, your progesterone levels should be a little bit higher.
Yeah.
Right? They tend, like the name implies, progestation, and your estrogen should be lower. If at mid-cycle your estrogen levels continue to go up, you're going to be much more bloated, much more water retentive. Cravings are going to go up, and your liver begins to recirculate estrogen. That's a problem, right? Because what you really want is your estrogen to be discharged by your liver into urine and broken down and out. When you can't break it down properly, it goes up and it stays elevated, and that's going to make you bloat. It's going to increase cravings. It's going to distort thinking and so on.
So my question there is, if you're testing your testosterone, estrogen, progesterone as a woman, and I'm sure we also want to consider male hormones.
Correct.
How valuable is it to have those under control before you get to pre-menopause? Will it help you through that transition? Or, what's the value in it?
Think about this, okay? So lifespan for an average woman in the first world, to the extent you could call it that 100 years ago in America, was probably under 40 years of age for most women, right? Men, lifespan for the average male at the turn of the century, 19th to 20th century was maybe 50 years of age, more or less. So lifespans were not what we're looking at now, right? If you're planning on living a long life, and you're planning on living a long, good life, then getting through menopause dealing with hormones in the ways that we can now, especially natural hormone replacement therapy. And we're going to probably discuss that, you and I, at another session. What is it? Sources of these particular more native hormone sources in the body. They're going to work for you in the fact that you're not going to live 40 years. I mean, short of an accident occurring, you're going to live really long. So you want the quality of your life past menopause, when you no longer have any eggs left, to be meaningful. Mm-hmm. So we know that having a certain amount of estrogen present, you're going to continue to produce some estrogen anyway. Some women don't need hormone replacement therapy after they get through menopause. But for many women, in terms of quality of life, their personal life, their sexual life, their emotional life, their mental life really pivots on
the
hormones themselves. So you may be 60, you may wind up living to your 90 or more.
Yeah.
But what's the quality of your life going to be like if we can actually work with your hormones? Not so that they're like what you were when you were in your 20s and 30s, but how about if I can keep your hormone levels at more or less like an extended 40?
But if you started that in your going into your 40s, let's say, you start testing your hormone levels, you start getting them to the right baseline.
Right.
You haven't even gotten into premenopause yet. Is that going to prolong getting into premenopause, or is it just going to make the journey a more pleasant experience?
I would think so. You don't know what your flip over is going to be like, right? Yeah. Like if you're going to have hot flashes, you're going to have migraines.
And you also can't control the time at which that comes
You don't know.
Okay.
You just don't know when your
It's
last
not a
day.
baseline of like your hormones need to be at this to like get your, to keep your fertility longer. Because like you were saying,
No, you don't want to keep your fertility longer, right?
It's based on your egg level.
That's correct. So once you're out of eggs, then we're talking about quality of life.
Okay.
There are enough people that we work with that I think are brilliant at natural hormone replacement therapy. Mm-hmm. And I would work with somebody like that.
Like an endocrinologist or...
There are endocrinologists.
Or a reproductive endocrinologist.
It depends. I'm not a big fan of conventional prescription hormones. Okay. I'm not going to get into them here. But I'm a big fan of natural hormone replacement therapy because they tend to be plant-based for the most part. Okay. You can control the amounts that you're taking much better. Premarin is a hormone that's used often. It's pregnant mare's urine source estrogen. For a lot of women going on Premarin, which is a form of estrogen that's extracted from pregnant mare urine, you've got all these different destinations throughout the U.S. and Canada where they keep mares in a quasi-pregnant state in large measure, right after they've given birth to a foal, and control the amount of estrogen that they can extract from their urine. Right. And so they'll give that to a human being, a woman, a female, and oftentimes it comes with a catastrophic side effects. Yes, maybe it'll control some of the worst symptoms, but there's problems on the other end. So we'll go with natural hormone replacement therapy.
I want to go into women's health in another episode. Sure. But then we also have the Dutch hormone test. Correct. Which a lot of people we admire are backing. But that one we're saying is a bit, you have to spend quite a bit of money out of pocket. Insurance. That's correct, yeah. It. But do we want to go into a little bit what that tests and how it's valuable?
That's a much more comprehensive look at your hormones than what you're going to get off a blood test.
For both male and female, would you recommend it? Okay.
Right? And there are different kinds of versions of that particular test. It tends to be collected both through urine and saliva. Okay. So you're going to get a comprehensive look at different hormones throughout your day. The point, of course, is to get a better idea as to whether or not what's going on with you has at root some sort of hormone imbalance. Mm-hmm. And so now you've got the whole picture. Mm-hmm. All these steroidal hormones in your body, testosterone and so on. Women need to also be clear about their levels of female testosterone. men need to know what their testosterone levels are also. Men go through their own menopause. It's called andropause. There are other names for it also. But it may not be, let's say, as dramatic, as catastrophic, a flip over, right? It could be that men are going through their own menopause for a much longer period of time, but they're going to suffer too. Weight gain, a lot of fat that's gained around the stomach, changes in terms of brain function. There may be problems in terms of building muscle mass. So what you're getting is premature aging. Mm-hmm. Men also, lifespan was, like I said before, 50 years of age at the turn of the century, at the turn of the 19th century. Now men are going to live a lot longer too. So do you want to be in your 70s and 80s with a big paunch belly? You can hardly build any muscle. Your sexual life sucks. You want to get your hormone levels measured, and there are different products that we use that I think work remarkably well in terms of normalizing and bringing testosterone levels up later in life for men, also for women. Some men do really well with exogenous testosterone. You'll discuss that. You can discuss it with your doctor, a hormone specialist that deals with male concerns.
Yeah.
So some men actually will do better with a testosterone patch, testosterone pellets.
This is a big topic of conversation right now. I guess we should also do a men's health episode
absolutely,
on testosterone,
absolutely.
right?
And both for men and women, past andropause or menopause, you're talking about the loss of muscle mass.
Yeah.
Right? And so we want to be clear about all of that from a hormonal perspective too.
Is there a comprehensive test we can do for muscles?
You're gonna actually no, but
wouldn't that be interesting though?
Yes, and I think there will be.
But you would have to see if someone was going to create that. You would have to have comparison baselines of what your muscle mass was at age 15, 35, as you're aging, right? To kind of
correct,
because it's so individual based.
Very much so, but you can actually measure biological efficiency, right?
Yeah.
VO2 max testing,
right?
Ways where you can see your current level of fitness.
Yeah.
And you can do percentage of body mass. I can find out how much of you is muscle, how much of you is fat, how much of you is water. You can buy a scale on Amazon for $20. That'll break that down for you. So there's that kind of testing too. Mm. One of the things that you and I want to avoid, certainly as we get older, is the loss of muscle mass, which accelerates aging, and you're gonna pay a price for that.
And that's one where I was listening to Peter Attia's podcast recently, talking about Ozempic versus Mounjaro, and also metformin, and how I do recall him saying that Ozempic and metformin were harder on your muscle mass.
Correct.
Which is why he didn't recommend it long term.
Right.
But Mounjaro seemed to be less so. Something we should dive deeper into.
Very much also IGLP-1 peptide, semaglutide peptide, which Mounjaro and Ozempic are made from. You got to work with somebody who understands the use of peptides really well there. There are people that need to break down their percentage of body fat.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a give or a take. Like maybe you're going to lose. I guess what he was saying is yes, you're losing weight, but a lot of the weight you're losing is your muscle.
That's
not
correct.
Your fat. But at the same time, you're losing fat as well.
Yes. Well, Ozempic is not going to discriminate. It's just burning the house down.
Yeah.
Everything's coming down, right? The ability to regulate senescence, aging, the fact that your muscles will get older, that you're going to lose power. I mean, you should be able to get on the ground and do 40 push-ups, right?
Right.
At any age. To the extent that
I don't know that I could do 40 push-ups at any age.
And also grip strength. I mean, as you get older, these are signs of senility. Your inability to actually even open the top of a bottle jar.
But so, as someone who's working with peptides and semaglutide, do you recommend that there's a stopping point where you say, okay, we've kind of reached our goal here, let's scale back on this because we don't want it to have long-term muscle mass effects? Or is everything too new that we're not curious about that place yet?
If I'm going to work with semaglutide, IGLP-1, Ozempic, and any kind of iteration of these drugs, at the same time, they need to be working out, they need to be fit, they need to be doing weight-bearing exercise, right? Otherwise, it's like we were talking about before. The whole house gets burnt down.
Yeah.
And so at the end, maybe you're thinner, but you may be thinner and not healthier. Yeah. Right? And your muscle mass has deteriorated, and your power. Right? So it's important that as we get older, if we're practicing medicine 3.0, then what you're doing is you're practicing fitness throughout your whole life. Yeah. Right? And I wish it were that you didn't have to use medications like Ozempic or metformin. But there are people that unfortunately life has caught up in all the wrong ways. The hormone levels haven't worked for you as you've gotten past a certain point in your life, 50, 60, 70, and you want to regulate your hormones so that you are in a way mimicking hormone levels of when you were younger, not when you were 20. Okay. Right? But that there's a kind of sweet spot that's going to work for you, right? Whether you're a man or a woman. Besides that, you're going to want to stay extremely fit, and hopefully you're going to navigate all the things that are causing your body to break down, weight gain around the stomach, losing power in your muscles. These are things that we can deal with also with other peptides. Yeah. Right, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to do
a whole peptide episode, but in terms of our diagnostic testing, okay, a few other nutrient-based things we want to talk about: omega-3 and 6. Right. What's that good for?
One of the best sources of fatty acids, EPA and DHA, that have a lot to do with states of mind, intelligence, brain development. Beyond that, a general global drop in inflammation and a very specific drop in inflammatory parameters around your heart. If you want to get your good cholesterol up, one of the easiest ways to do it is by increasing omega-3 fatty acids. Those are going to come off primarily from seafood. Okay. Right?
Vitamin D.
If you live in the northern states, if you live in an area where you've got 4 seasons, your vitamin D levels are going to often suffer. In the winter, you're going to suffer. If you're indoors a lot more.
What number do you want to see your clients at in terms of vitamin D?
If you're looking at a lab test, the bottom is 30 IUs, the cap is 100 IUs. I want it about 80. Okay. Now, if your levels of vitamin D are low, your immune system's going to suffer. For many people, there's going to be problems in many other areas of health. Vitamin D isn't so much a vitamin as it is an immune modulator. Looks a lot like different parts of the immune system itself, like interferon and so on. So low levels of vitamin D make you more susceptible to different degrees of illness. There are now studies that correlate vitamin D with better health in terms of your heart, better heart health, and there are studies that seem to indicate that vitamin D has a lot to do with your mood, right? Yeah, so vitamin D is critical. I'd say maintaining it, a sweet spot plus 60, on a blood test.
Getting it from sunshine is obviously the most valuable form, but if not, we have to supplement.
And sometimes you got to do both. You got to get sunlight and you got to supplement.
So let's talk about 5-MTHFR. That's a gene test, right?
Yeah, but
you can do it it's a blood work gene test, yeah.
Right off the top. Yeah. Right? 5-MTHFR is a gene sequence, 3 gene sequences that you and I want to know about because it has a lot to do with controlling heart disease. Mm-hmm. That sequence does, primarily by the regulation of homocysteine. Okay. So we know that how to control homocysteine in large measure has to do with whether you've got the favorable gene sequence or you don't. Okay. Right? And folic acid, different kinds of folic acid, 5-MTHFR type folic acid does control homocysteine. For a lot of people, it also controls moods. There's a greater tendency towards depression when homocysteine is up and 5-MTHFR is low. Okay. So we can even help you with your states of mind by introducing folic acid too. So that's really, really an important test.
And then we can do a micronutrient panel.
That's correct. You want to look at that would be by request. Most
Yeah.
doctors are not going to go for
Well,
it.
I think we're also at the point where most of these are by request, right?
That's correct.
Or they're coming here to your clinic,
Correct.
and your medical clinic is assisting with those.
Very
additional
much
tests,
so,
right?
yeah.
Or offering them. Okay, so then let's go on to gene testing, which we just
Sure.
The 5-FTMHFR. We talked about how that's a gene test. That's an important gene test.
Right.
Correct. So let's talk about gene testing in general to have a comprehensive gene
Sure.
test of your DNA.
Correct.
There's one company you told me you like called Self-Decode.
Right.
And you're friends with Joe Cohen. Who
Yeah,
started
Joseph
it,
Cohen's
right?
brilliant. He's the inventor of Self-Decode and Self-Hacked, which is a landing page that gives you an immense amount of data on nutrients, health, overall. Just really brilliant. If you want whatever you want to know about hacking, diet, supplements, and so on, Self-Hacked is terrific. He developed Self-Decode, where you can get any. There are different tiers in terms of the kind of testing that you can do, but I think it's probably one of the best gene tests that are available in terms of how they do the sequencing, their lab work, how it's all put together. It's pretty impeccable, all state of the art. But I think that at the end, the result that you get, the breakdown itself, in terms of being able to interpret what your gene sequences mean, they've done a great job.
Yeah.
They're going to break down all the data for you in terms of categories.
Okay.
So I love Joe Cohen's work in that regard.
And they break it down in a way that it's easy for us to
Right, like I can
understand, yeah.
pinpoint your potential for Alzheimer's. I can pinpoint your potential for heart disease. I can pinpoint your potential for even living long.
But you could kind of understand if you didn't have access to functional medicine or an educator like yourself, you would be able to look at their report and understand that.
That's correct. That's what I meant.
That's
That it's in
yeah.
English.
Yeah.
In other words, it's very user friendly.
And I actually just ordered one, so I'm gonna use it. And then I think you've already done yours, right? So
Correct.
we want to look at it. Maybe toward the end of this episode, we'll take a look at it as an example.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one that we also want to talk about, the gut microbiome,
Right.
which is a stool test,
Right.
Right, and there's a brand that you like.
I like Viome.
Biome.
I think that it's exceptional data. Look, there's so much that your immune system pivots off of,
In
right?
your gut.
and
your brain, right?
No
Your
question
brain,
about
yeah.
it. But your immune system, if you're prone to infections, if you have a history of antibiotic use, if you're finding that you're aging prematurely, a lot has to do with your immune system. And like you said, your immune system is going to pivot off of the quality of the bacteria in your bowel, your microbiome. So some studies indicate that up to 70% of your immune expression is going to be determined by the bacteria in your bowel.
That's so crazy.
It is. And
But that's always changing, right? Like we go through periods of time where it's more healthy than others and less healthy than others.
yes, like
that's
stress
kind of
can
like-
alter it,
yeah.
for instance.
Yeah, like
lack of sleep
how
can alter
often
it.
would you recommend someone doing that test?
I would say as a baseline, as soon as you can.
Yeah, but I mean, because I'm saying that it's something that's forever changing, right? Depending
Correct.
on your stress, depending on what you're putting in and out of your body, depending on how focused you are on it, how often would you retest that? Because that seems like one that's just, like we're doing all this for baseline in some people, depending on what their responses are or what their disease history is, their family history is. They'll do it, every 3 months, every 6 months, once a year, every 5 years if
Sure.
you're lucky. For the microbiome, how often would you recommend doing that test?
Depends on what your life is like and what you're going through.
Okay.
Right? So if you're going through a good period,
Yeah.
a lot of equanimity, life's great, you're working out, you're fit, you're going to bed early, IRS isn't chasing you, whatever. You're just having your life, right? And there's really no reason then to be retesting with greater frequency. If, however, you're leading a highly demanding life, maybe you've gone through a course of medication, antibiotics, and so on, then you want to retest a little bit more often, right? Maybe every 6 months, I want to look at. We know that people under stress, people that are suffering under an illness, their microbiome gets compromised pretty quickly.
Right.
We know that even meditation on a regular basis can alter your microbiome for the better.
Okay.
Right? So if meditation can do that, can improve the quality of microbiome, even without taking probiotics, what would it be like if you're under unrelenting stress for long periods of time?
Without doing meditation and
Correct.
Yeah.
So that can alter your microbiome, which then can compromise your immune system, your brain, your states of mind, your moods, and so on.
And our immune system is so important too as we age in terms of fighting off cancer.
Yeah, no question about
Right.
it. Well,
And other diseases.
most degenerative illnesses are going to show up later in life,
Yeah.
right? It's rare that you find cancer in children. I mean, it's there, but it's not that rare once you get into your 60s and 70s and so on. You've got a number of things going on, an immune system that isn't working like it should. You've got DNA and RNA that isn't expressing a proper gene expression properly. So you're going to get mutations within DNA, right? Let's say that there's a sequence that you and I, that your DNA is going to follow to make a healthy eyeball. As you get older, as you get that much duplication over and over and over years, decades, and so on, at some point you're going to get a mutation.
Okay.
And that's where you get cancer later in life.
And so that leads us to the pre-cancer screening.
Correct.
Which is really valuable. The gallery, or sorry, yeah. What's the name of the pre-cancer screening?
Gallery.
Gallery.
Yeah,
that's
well,
gallery.
yeah.
Okay.
I like to pronounce it gallery.
Gallery, yeah. We also wanted to look at your gallery.
The what?
We wanted to look at yours because you've done it.
Sure, yeah.
right?
Well, I'm trying to get a copy of it.
Yeah. As soon as we get a copy, we're gonna go through it in this episode.
It's terrific because.
But how? Yeah. What I want to tell me what's terrific.
Sure.
And I also want to know how is it sort of more complex than all the other comprehensive blood work that we just spoke about, because they're pre-cancer screening. So what is it they're looking at?
Well, when you're looking at blood, you're looking at antibodies, immunoglobulins that are indicating that there's a possibility that you could have cancer.
Because they're attached to a tumor or
or they're gonna rise. Immunoglobulins are gonna rise in reaction to that. There's a tumor somewhere, right? But they could be somewhat inaccurate. The Gallery test is extremely accurate because it's testing actually for DNA traces of tumors.
Okay.
So a tumor is going to leave kind of like its fingerprint.
Yeah.
In a DNA marker. That's what the Gallery test is looking
so it's
for.
very early stages.
Very much so.
Which can be triggering, right? It can trigger anxiety. So you have to kind of, like you said, go a step further. When you get back either false positives or you're getting back elevated numbers, you've got to go in and really gut out what's going on there.
Yeah, but Bonnie, look, we talked about this after I got really sick with COVID, I was getting false positives for different cancers in my blood work, right? COVID, the gift that keeps on giving, kind of. And that would also often enough drive me to very high anxiety. I mean, I can't tell you any number of times that I went and I had scans because my blood test showed that I had a high level for pancreatic cancer, let's say, the possibility for that. Had it scanned, no problems with my pancreas. That led me to do the Gallery test, right? Gallery test showed that I was negative for all 50 cancers. That gave me great relief, right? And now I understand how it is that COVID itself kind of screwed up how my immune system itself reads. Remember, we're looking at antibodies, which are critical aspects of the immune system, that were just giving wrong readings overall on standard blood tests, right? So Gallery can also give you peace of mind. I think that if you have familial cancer. Your dad had cancer, your mom maybe had cancer, your sibling had cancer. This is important data.
Yeah.
So for me, it was really important based on what I just told you, post-COVID. My dad had very aggressive prostate cancer. So it was time to check. And it's not only like, oh my God, do I have cancer? It's just the relief. And if there is something that comes back, that you can do something about it. Right.
And then some people also are going a step further. They're doing the full body scan.
That's right.
Which it's kind of in such an early phase, right? So there's a great one called Pronova that a lot of celebrities are, they're posting about this. Some celebrities have even gotten, caught pancreatic cancer in stage 1 and it's prolonged their life. So what is your take? Have you tried Pronova? Do you recommend it to clients?
I was advised not to. That doesn't, and to go with Gallery instead. If we were to, again, use Peter Attia, his recommendation pretty much is to go with Gallery and maybe skip doing the full body scan. I think that's going to be a personal decision.
Okay.
Right? So given the potential for a false positive, that wasn't so attractive for me.
Yeah.
I already had enough false positives in my case. This is going to be a personal decision. I think 5 years from now, Pronovo and full body scan testing will be better developed, and certainly in terms of the feedback that you get either from them or from somebody who can interpret that test for you much better.
I guess the nice thing there is like you kind of go do a full body scan, and that's sort of like provocative ideas of the future is being able to I always had this idea of what if you could take some type of a pill that went, when it went into your body, opened up like a spider and went through and could sort of scan all your organs.
It's coming.
I mean, that's sort of where the future's at. So Pronova kind of looks like the first step towards that, in terms of just, okay, let's identify the entire body. But yeah, like you said, it's not there yet. It's not any better than when you go, for an ultrasound for potential breast cancer and they don't find anything because sometimes those tests don't pick up.
That's correct.
So there are other ways. The Gallery test looks like it's catching it a little bit sooner. Or, if for breast cancer, for example, you should do, like fine needle aspiration, get some tissue.
Correct.
Testing it. But obviously depends on which cancers, what the options are.
That's right.
And where you're at. But at this point in time, probably the most cost efficient way to do a pre-screening to see if you need to look at anything else is Gallery.
Exactly.
That's what we're recommending.
Yeah, and what you're alluding to in terms of taking a pill that can open, we're talking about transhumanist futures.
Yeah.
Right. We're looking at what it's going to be like to almost be post-human.
Right. Which will right. That's a topic of conversation happening now with Neuralink and artificial intelligence and how far away we are from that. We don't know. And who's going to upload and download and not take that step.
Yeah. I mean, that's really the future of medicine. Yeah. There's a particular.
But I do think that although some people have this grand fantasy that it's coming in the next 5 to 10 years, I don't believe that we're going to be there that quickly. Although I hope for it, because it would mean a lot of advances in science.
Well, let's say with the advent of AI and how it's advancing at a highly accelerated pace. There's going to be, and I want to be careful how I say this, because I think that a lot of this kind of testing, way to work with people's health, will be available, but it may not be so democratically available.
Exactly.
Right? Like we're talking about testing right now that's going to come out of pocket. And I had to lecture for Summit. Somebody actually in the audience asked me about that. And we're in a way catering to a certain percentage of people that can afford this. And I think at some point you and I will have to do probably a session on the moralistic aspects of making a lot of this testing available for people.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Okay, so I think then we also sometimes we do hair testing, right? What do you think the benefits are of hair testing? And I know you like one company, Doctor's Data.
Correct.
What are we testing for with hair testing? And that's sort of an old school one because I remember doing that back in high school too.
Sure.
So it's been around for a long time.
Yeah, and we've done hair testing we used to do it a lot. I think it's great for testing neurotoxic metals.
Okay.
Cadmium, mercury, lead, aluminum, nickel, kind of that. I'm more inclined to go that way.
Okay.
There are particular trends that you can get in hair testing. The problem is you often find that you're not going to get a very standardized result with a hair test, right? There tend to be such broad fluctuations. I could do your hair test this week, and next week I can take a sample of your hair from the other side of your scalp, and it's going to come back in terms of mineral levels somewhat different. So I think there's a lot more that we need to do in terms of the accuracy of hair testing. So it's really not one of my more favorite ones.
Okay.
Only for neurotoxins.
So we moved on a little bit from
Correct.
hormone. And then DEXA, the bone density test.
Everybody past 50. Both
Okay.
men and women should do it.
But we shouldn't start it earlier.
Not necessarily.
It's not valuable.
No, I don't think so. I mean,
Okay.
you're talking about loss of bone that's going to begin to occur at a certain point
Okay.
with loss and drop in hormones. If you're an athlete in the way that I was, I probably should have done a DEXA test early, and I would have caught a lot of the damage to my body
Yeah.
from all the years of
And
racing.
that's one of the tools that we were talking about last time. Remind me the name of this really cool. Oh, OsteoStrong.
Yeah.
I kind of want to do that just myself because I'm a person who falls often, so I'm sure my bones need like.
Well,
to go in there and check if they're
OsteoStrong is terrific. I mean, what you're doing essentially is you're working out
your bones.
10
right?
minutes twice a week or once a week, and it has a massive measurable effect on your bone density. That's a big deal.
What time? At what age do you recommend that? Also 50.
So you can say, I'd say start young.
Yeah.
Start young. And it also tends to build a better lean muscle mass as you get older.
Okay.
Right? And again, not to overdrill it, but the loss of muscle mass or the quality of muscle mass as you get older is called sarcopenia. Things like OsteoStrong reduce the risk of osteopenia.
Okay. That's super valuable. So we also said books for diagnostics. So we're going to go with Outlive again, which we talked about in another episode by Peter Attia.
Okay.
He kind of goes in there, lists it out. But we're also going to create our own pamphlet on our website
Exactly.
for people so they have this information so they can go to their own functional medicine doctor.
That's correct.
Request these tests be done. And in terms of supplements, this really is hard to give out specific supplements. So I think here we need to evaluate everyone individually. So again, either they need to come into your clinic or see a functional medicine person in their own area. There's some research they can probably do, or as we grow our various episodes in this series, we will dive deeper into certain things depending on
Correct.
tests that come back of our own or other people that we're going to have on, right?
Sure, and also, I mean, you and I should do, we're going to do an episode just simply on the categories of supplements, what's valuable there or not. Of course, the rider is always consult your GP, your doctor, somebody who can advise you properly as to whether certain supplements would be good for you or not.
The other thing is we have great industry leaders
Correct.
that are constantly talking diagnostics
Yes.
and how that affects us. And a lot of them do tests, on themselves as
That's correct.
examples. So that's somewhere you can get more information. So we said Peter Attia, Rhonda Fitzpatrick, Andrew Huberman, and the Hidden Brain NPR.
Correct.
Okay.
Those are great.
Yeah, those are great,
Yeah.
right? They're all scientists with a lot of great information here. And also,
Absolutely.
I think something that would be great for this for people who have more questions is you were telling me about Perplexity AI. And
Oh, yeah.
Why is that
That's my favorite.
your choice?
My favorite search engine for everything nutritional, medical, hormonal. Perplexity.ai is a wonder. All right, so that I think would be a great suggestion for anybody that's working with us.